How do you clean your fidget? I'm just
So
curious.
this one is like soapy water.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Yeah, it rinses clean again for, yeah. So it's
In case,
Dollarama. And
okay.
whenever I see them, I buy extras so that way I can have them in different places. And if one, punctures or gets old or lost, I can.
Nice. Listen, if we do keep this bit about the fidget, I do want my listeners to remember to wash their fidgets
Yeah, the ones that you
occasionally.
can, some of them you can't. And yeah, it's not a sustainable fidget for me.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know if I could maintain the fidget. I think I I think I would obsess over the fidget and then it would become like my cat. Like I'm obsessed with my
Yeah.
cat.
Yeah. And that's like, we talk this about a lot of this in like education where it's like, is it a tool or a toy? And it can be both, right? So it's how you use it. And so it's like, if something is engaging and helps you focus on whatever else you're doing or helps you regulate, then that's a tool. But if it's something that then you're like hyper focused on it, then that's not for you in that moment unless you're using it to distract you from something maybe stressful. So again, like it depends, right? So if something like your cat would be great in a high stress environment, you can like pair that environment with your cat and that'll help you get through it.
She is that for me.
There you go.
That's why we bring her
Yeah.
everywhere. Do you and Mark have pets?
No. So do you remember me having a bird though?
I don't, but please tell me about the bird.
I had a bird.
We are recording. I'm keeping this part. Okay, you had a
Okay.
bird in
We'll
university?
talk about spaghetti and then
Yeah,
the color purple. And so just
that's
whatever you
right.
think
Please.
listeners are going to be interested in hearing. I
Okay.
had a bird and I was 11 when I got him. And I had him till only a couple of years ago. Like he was an old bird. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So yeah, his name was Buddy.
I'm
And
sorry for
so
your loss.
yeah, thank you. He was like, it was weird for me because I grew up with him and then I got this life of my own and it was like he came along for the ride, but like our interaction changed because I became a grown up and then I had children and like responsibilities and I wasn't in the home as much. So,
Yeah.
but because like I moved around so much as a kid, he was like a consistent thing in my life. So it hit me really hard because
I
like
bet.
there's lots of change and provinces changed and homes changed and schools changed, but like he was there for like not as
All
far as
of
I
it.
can remember, but you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
he's been around for a long time.
Wow. So Bird was around. Sorry, what was Bird's name?
Buddy.
Buddy. Buddy
Yeah.
was around when we met.
Yep.
But where were you living when we met? Well, so like let's tell our little heartbeat listeners. We met at St. Mary's University. We were
Yeah.
both in psychology, studying
Yes.
psychology.
Yeah.
And where were you living? And with Buddy?
I I lived in an apartment with my nan actually and Buddy for a year in Dartmouth. So that was how because
Okay.
what had happened was I was living with my parents going into university, but then my dad got posted to Kingston, which is where I am currently. So I decided to finish my degree and stay back for a fourth year. And so my nan was like from the Maritimes, and so we just decided to live together, be roommates, which was very interesting. And yeah, Buddy stayed back with me. So, yeah.
Oh my goodness. I feel like Buddy was there during, okay, so when we met, but like during my tough time, Buddy was there over in Dartmouth. Now I feel even worse that Buddy's not around anymore. But I did want to tell you that I don't have very sharp memories from that time. And I don't know if it was because I was going through such a rough time
Yeah.
internally, but what I do remember about us was
Hmm.
we had this one day we met at the student what do you call it, like the student building, the
Yeah.
where
I don't
what's
know.
it called,
Student Union building? Wasn't it the
student union
sub?
building, yeah, the sub.
Yeah.
And we had this great talk, and you listened to me. I probably cried. I was going through this rough time. I don't
Yeah.
remember exactly what you said to me, but I remember you listened and you were so kind.
Oh,
And something about that, just always that chat and you, and how you always were, our friendship always
mm,
stuck with me. And
oh.
that was so long ago. That
It
was so long ago.
was. I
And
know.
you never forget, I never
No.
forget those particular feel, like the way I sometimes forget what the content was, but I
Right.
don't forget how somebody made me feel.
Yeah.
And you made me feel heard. And
Oh,
and hey, I get to thank you on a chat with our podcast.
that's so nice. Oh, it's so
And
funny because like to hear that I made that impact, humble me was like it felt like just like a privilege to get to have a conversation with you, and you've always been very honest and open, and I really love that. And it was just it felt like easy, and social stuff does not inherently feel easy for me very often. And so when those moments do happen, I'm just like love that person, putting them in my pocket. um so, and I actually have this like long running thing where being autistic me, I kind of refer to people as objects, and I didn't recognize that it was kind of an autistic thing. And I don't
mm,
feel like you're an object, but I feel
I
like I
can be.
collect people. Like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Which is, that's like an object. So,
Yeah.
so you're
I'll be
one
an
of the
object.
people where I'm like, I've kept you,
I love it.
because you're just one of those quality people that I feel like, doesn't matter when or how long it's been apart, the connection points are quite lovely and meaningful. And yeah, so
I'm
thanks for
not quite.
sharing that.
Oh, you're well, thank you for being there for me. And I'm not quite a fidget, maybe, but I'm totally 100% cool with being an object in your life. And
Yeah.
I think I can, I think I can relate on some level to that as
Yeah.
well. So let's talk about your background and your education and your work experience leading you up to becoming an entrepreneur. And we're gonna,
Mm,
of course, I'm so excited for people to hear about what it is you do. But let's start
yeah.
with your background and kind of how it led you up
Oh,
to this
yeah.
entrepreneurial moment of your life.
Yeah. Well, like you said, we met in psychology, and so I realized I jumped around what I wanted to be, right? You put on all the hats, but ultimately, like how the brain works and how we think and how we develop and grow has always been super interesting to me. And I think it now I'm realizing that it's about rooting and like figuring yourself out, like just understanding yourself and understanding everyone around you, and like your identity, I feel like is really rooted in, our brains. So that's where it started. And then by the end of fourth year, I wasn't sure if I was thinking about doing clinical. I did a thesis because I was thinking about grad school. I did the GREs. So it was like I was trying to kind of, discern what was next for me. And then someone, I think it was because we were doing study groups, and I was probably like making a bulletin board or a poster, or I had some sort of mnemonic device that I was using to help us remember, whatever we were going to be examined on.
I
They're like,
love it.
you're like a teacher. You should be a teacher. And I was like, huh? And I was like, oh, actually, that makes sense. so,
Yeah.
so especially even thinking if I was leaning clinical, it would have been like children. Like I was always wanting to kind of work with young learners, or younger learners. So yeah, so then I kind of started to research teachers college, and then volunteered. I did, and I've always volunteered in schools and classrooms, tutor, like, so I mean it was kind of like a duh
Hmm.
at the moment. So yeah, and then I became an elementary school teacher in Kingston, and I've been an elementary school teacher for over 15 years. And I've currently like kind of like pressed pause on like the public school role. But throughout like my tenure in the public board, I kind of gravitated towards special education, which again, like it just ends up, you just kind of find your path, right? So,
Hmm.
so spec ed really resonated to me, just in terms of like how to be inclusive and design universally, which I always wanted to do in class. There was a lot of talk like in my early teaching years about how hard it was to teach to all the different neurotypes or all the different disabilities or needs. And it was like really stressful to think of, how do I like individually plan, individual education plan? Oh my gosh, that sounds so targeted. And so I kept like kind of trying to zoom out and think, how do I cast a really wide net and try to meet the needs of all my students? And then I thought too, like, if it's good for this person here, why not? It might be helpful for everybody or most. I'll just make them for everybody. We'll just use visual schedules for everybody. We'll just, to have labels on everything with pictures. We'll just do look fors and make it really explicit and concrete. And we'll just do timers and pacing, right? So I was always kind of like moving in that direction. So yeah, so that was kind of like the education lens, the spec ed lens, and then me starting to have my own kids and having a family was
3 children. That's an achievement. Even
children.
one.
Yeah.
One. Half a kid, I think, is a lot.
Yeah.
3. That's amazing. And neurodiverse.
Yes.
So is this what motivated you to pursue some kind of assessment for yourself? And I'd love to hear about that. And because I think there are a lot of adults listening who are either, walking through this themselves or suspecting it, or, looking at other family members or their own kids. And like,
I was really curious about our kids because, and I love just the idea of being curious because you just want to know, like it's for the sake of it. And so it was never about like fixing things, and it was never about, that kind of path, but it was like we're intervening so that way we can like empower and understand and have all the tools we can to support the kids and know them best. So that started early on. So I have 3 kids, oldest daughter, middle son, and then an itty bitty. She's going to be 6 in a few weeks. So, and my oldest is going to be 12. So there's, a good range. But discovering, some differences or some things that were kind of interesting or different about them. And sometimes things that were, not developmentally checklist, on milestone on the path. So they were like, we wondered about what the implications were of those things. Also paralleled with, well, I did this, or this was like me, and so I did notice like apples don't fall far from trees, right? So I did get curious about that. And so autism was one that was really, I think, pretty clear to us. And I mean, even as a classroom teacher, I did seem to really notice a lot of like those traits and tendencies, but they present differently in different people because they say it's a spectrum. And there's this Mark Shore quote, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. And so to create kind of like a schema of like what autistic looks like is really tricky. But we all do it because that's what brains do, right? They think, what does this remind me of? And oh, that's autism, So it was tricky too to kind of like tease out, is that autism? But then, you just kind of dig and learn and figure it out. So once we kind of were on the path to diagnosing our kids, I started to think pretty clearly that I was. And so I, went in for an assessment, but I had to wait for a year to do it. And so then went through that whole process. And then through that process, I had kind of said, give me the full workup. Like I want it all. I want the cognitive profile. I want to like think of all the things. And anxiety was on my radar like early on, like in my teens. So I already knew that I had those tendencies. So I wanted to kind of look into an identification if that was relevant for, what that meant for me. And then what also kind of crept in was ADHD. And again, I had my own ideas about what that looked like. And so that inattentive presentation wasn't something that was really like, it didn't resonate with me. And then when I started to look at the inventories, and then my husband did interviews, and it was like, oh. So it totally made sense. And so by the time I actually like went through, it was like a 9-hour process, like
Wow.
different, inventories, questionnaires, lots of interviews, especially for autism, because it's so like qualitative. It's not like you just do a checklist. Like there's obviously inventories, but then there's lots of like personal history looking for evidence and stuff. By the time that all thing, was complete, I came out with the 3 diagnoses, and I was like, okay.
Well, that's good for your money. You got a lot out of that.
I know. I was like, if I'm paying for this, I better have at least
I
2.
want 3 or 4 or 5.
Yes, I want, yeah.
Wow. Were you shocked? Like, how did you feel? Were you shocked or were you not surprised? I know you went into this like with some
Yeah.
curiosity and
Yeah. I
inkling that.
wanted validation,
Mhm.
obviously. I thought that I was autistic. At that point, I was pretty concerned, like, not concerned, confident that I was.
Mhm.
The ADHD, like, definitely resonated with me. And then I wondered, like, how anxiety played a role. Now, there's lots of talk about how it might be even hard to tease out autism and anxiety because the inherent condition like is anxious. Like it's an environment that is unpredictable and dynamic and overstimulating, and so anxiety.
Mhm.
But I did get that generalized anxiety disorder identification, and I realized that I kind of diminished it at first, like, and I'm also anxious and I have that generalized anxiety disorder, but I've
Mhm.
been like learning again because it's a bit of it's a journey because you're shifting all the time with, moving forward with this information and then like what that looks like. It it is just as big a part of me as the autism and the ADHD. So they all have merit and value, and so I'm trying to really just embrace the that my anxiety voice, like she's there. I might refer to her.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
There she
yeah. And I'm
is.
like, come along, like it's okay.
Yeah. I see you. I hear you. Man, right
Yeah.
this second, I may not listen to you,
Don't try
but
to shush her. Don't
yeah,
do
I'm
that.
hearing you, but I actually am going to go do that thing, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay, so this is fascinating. And when you had
What was
that
the
valid,
question?
yeah, oh, right. I was curious about your assessment. And
Right.
then once you have an assessment as an adult, and and you've had your children I'm assuming had been assessed as well by this point. For you personally, what was your next step? Like, do I treat this? Do I read more? Do I look for medication?
Yeah.
What was your own personal, because I guess I'm assuming some people are like, okay, well, I know, and that's validation, and that could be enough
Right.
for some
Yeah.
folks.
I know, and I'm trying to like speak for myself and not like frame things as like the way it should be done because I know
Hmm.
everyone has different ideas and what they're comfortable with, and I want to just like
Yeah.
honor that. For me, I wondered some of the same things. I wonder if this is like now I have the diagnosis, I tie the bow on it, and that's the end of that story, and I just move on with the rest of my life. I also had wonderings of like, I wonder what areas of my life this will impact. And I'm
Hmm.
laughing now because it's like all of them, like literally everything. But anyway,
Every.
it was like, I didn't know at the time, right? And then another thing was, how much will I share? I wasn't sure.
Hmm.
And now I'm super sure. So I think, yeah. So for me, I am autistic, so I use the like not with autism, a person with I use like I am an autistic woman and I have ADHD, the AU, DHD. And I like speak about anxiety as well, like pretty openly, like that is part of my lens. And so my I guess approach is I didn't fully understand myself until I had those diagnoses to like use as a lens and like to have that terminology to understand how all the dots of myself connected.
Yeah.
And so I don't think other people will understand me either unless I share that information with them. And I think it's about context, and
Hmm.
so we could talk about masking a lot. And I don't know if we're going to like take a side quest right now on that, but I mean,
Let's
like,
do it. I want a side quest. Let's see if I have some media that could bring us into a side quest. Okay. Like I have a drum roll
Okay.
or a transition to, are
Like
you
a
sensitive? How sensitive are you to audio? Because some of these
no,
might be like
fun,
kaboom.
fun.
Okay,
Yeah.
hold on. Let's do this transition. I actually don't know what this is going to sound like. Transition into masking. Oh, that sounded. I hope masking is a serious topic.
I think it is.
Let's talk about what is masking. Let's talk about that.
So masking is commonly used for like neurodivergent individuals who are basically trying to reduce or eliminate any tendencies, characteristics, or traits that have them stand out in order to be what is like neurotypical or accepting or like to fit in. And so it could be anything from like making eye contact with people because that's generally accepted as like being social and positive and ways to connect with people authentically, to like trying to reduce stims and not like flap or do anything that's like overtly looking different, to not be weird, right? Like all these kind of like stigmas against kind of standing out in that way, like scripts and types of ways of speaking, especially for girls, to try to like say the right things, do the right things, look the right way, get a read on things. Yeah, so that's kind of like in general masking, even just like being in an environment that might be like have strong sensory like sense, sounds, lights, and just kind of like buckling down and not reacting to it, not putting on sunglasses, not putting like noise canceling headphones in, or like not getting fresh air, getting space, just to because that's where you're expected to be at that point, just to kind of
Yeah.
like it's conforming, but also like the convention of whatever like cultural society group,
Mm-hmm.
expectations of whatever you're in and around.
Okay, so like, can I ask you if can I give you a scenario of my
Okay.
life, and can you tell me whether you think it's masking or not?
If you'd like me to.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's get. You can send me the bill after, okay? Okay. Okay. I'm 11 years old. I still suck my fingers. It's very soothing to
Mm-hmm.
me. There's a scent aspect to it,
Mm-hmm.
and this like these two fingers here, my middle and my whatever. What's this finger? A
Ruby?
ring finger.
Ring
Yeah.
finger? Yeah.
I sucked those fingers until I was 11,
Okay.
and I recognized that another girl in school brought her baby blanket to school and was made
Mm-hmm.
fun of. And so that told I was like, well, I can't, this is obviously not socially acceptable. I don't want to be made fun of.
Mm-hmm.
And so I burnt it, and I kept the ashes in an ice cream container until, until I recognized that that was very, very creepy. And I,
It was
like,
different. I would like the words we use matter, right? Don't like you're telling your brain I'm creepy. Not
I'm,
creepy. You were
okay.
trying to like cope with like that. Like I would say I'm observing like that's tension between what feels comfortable and right and what you think you
Hmm.
should be doing. And so that was your solution at the time. I don't think that
Thank
that's
you.
creepy.
Thank you. Although if somebody had found the ashes in the ice cream container, Melissa, that could have been perceived as quite concerning.
Well, yeah, I don't know. When I'm trying to like sit in I have a really good friend who says, I like to sit in the seat of curiosity and not judgment. And so I
Oh,
think
that's
that that's
sweet.
like the antidote, right? Where it's like, I'm not looking at it as like, oh God, like what I am
Yeah,
looking at is like, okay, now the blanket doesn't have the kind of characteristics and qualities that serve the purpose of making it comforting.
that's right.
I don't think that that was your intention,
Thank you. You're so
right?
kind.
Um, right.
Okay, is there, let's, would you mind sharing something like a specific way that you masked, maybe even up until your diagnosis?
Oh goodness.
Were there a
And I mean,
lot?
we all mask in a certain like to a certain extent, and I think that there's like some pushback on like what masking is because they'll say, well, everybody has to like behave a certain way. We all have social norms and this and that, or there's some things that should be thinking things and not saying, right? Like your filter, and I think like it goes beyond that because it's super depleting
Mm,
to mask, especially if it's things like like stimming or movement or even sounds and the way you talk or way you want to communicate, that's for regulation. And so if you're hiding that stuff because it's not what is seen as acceptable for the moment, then that is actually like going against your nervous system, being like to able to access whatever activity or thing that you're supposed to be engaged in. So it's like it drains your battery like, a gas guzzling car would, It
Mm-hmm.
is not efficient. So that's my little caveat. So if I were to
Love it.
say like an example of masking, because I still like, I have to mask, I have to, because I have to go out in the world. But I'm trying to think of like things that I used to do so much because I was really scared of doing the wrong thing. So I think I
Mm.
was actually an excellent masker, but it was like all consuming. So when I kind of was in that like pivotal, like 12, 13-year-old year, like I kind of got a lot of like social information, like slaps of like, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. So I like learned how to look a certain way. I learned how to talk a certain way. And like I stopped being honest. I kind of was almost like a PR campaign where it was just like, you're just kind and lovely and everything is fine, you know? And so that was really tiring.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of like was like a big masking approach to me. But however, it works brilliantly until it doesn't. So what it does to you behind the scenes is kind of like, oh, well, that's okay. It's all for a good cause because I had like a
Mm.
real solid, day and I'm
Yeah.
successful at school and people like me. And so that's one part of it. But like you also, or I also would inevitably like make a blunder. And then
Mm.
it's kind of like, how do I like
Would you
fix it?
then like I would say obsessed, or like that blunder would take over, and then the shame, and then like would there be
To-
this terrible cycle because oh my gosh, I slipped up
Yep.
and I couldn't you couldn't accept it for like, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm saying this as a relatable, like I
Yeah.
definitely like have lived those
Uh-huh.
times when I was
Uh-huh.
younger, especially.
Yeah.
And I look back going, wow, you spent a lot of time worrying about
Yeah.
something that
So I didn't have the
wasn't.
lens that I was different. I just,
Mm,
I was just me and I would just have that social mistake. And then I'd be like, what's the matter with you? Like, how did you let that happen? You shouldn't have
mm,
done that. You should have done this. Like, or like it was either I wasn't attentive or I maybe was like ignore. Maybe I just was like unaware of something socially, and then people were upset, and I was like, oh no. And then so then I was like, next time I'm gonna be. And then I was like super attentive, which like gets you to be people pleasing, right? And
yeah,
it's
yeah.
and so it's not a great cycle. It's not.
No, I
It's not so
agree.
great.
I concur. So,
Hmm.
okay, so what has worked for you? What are some, I guess, big or small things that have worked for you to, I guess, accept and live more freely, perhaps?
Yeah, I think because I've had like the education experience and because I'm a parent of three neurodivergent kids, like I've had now like occupational therapy, like exposure, right? And learning about emotional regulation and having the tools and the terminology to use. And we've made our lower level like basement playroom like really sensory friendly. And like there's swings, there's crash mats, there's trampolines, there's like sensory and fidgets and low lighting and projectors and lo-fi. Like so all these things are great. And then like you think they're for the kids or they're for my classroom or they're for my, and then you're like, and also probably great for me too. And so like I
Mm-hmm.
think that's been like I can embrace all these things. It's not just
Mm,
for my kids. And so I like using a fidget has been something that it's like, oh yeah, this is really helpful. And can I like go to a thing and do a thing? Could I do this interview without it? Absolutely. Is it helpful for me to have it here? Absolutely. And so, just to be able to like have the agency to make that choice and say this is good for me and I'm going to like visibly have it and talk about it, like to me, that's like, that's me being brave and being like, this is helpful and people are going to notice. And so it's kind of like me standing up for myself in a way that, no one's overtly being like, what are you doing with that? But like in my
Yes.
head, it's like a spotlight's on me and I've got to fidget. Right. And so like it's optically, it feels very bold.
It's
So
cool. In fact, I'm inspired to let my future guests know that fidgets are welcome just because they are. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
or even like I have trouble sitting for long periods of time,
Hmm.
and I haven't really quite fashioned out the right standing desk yet, um, but kind of encouraging guests that do have trouble sitting for whatever reason
Hmm.
to that they can stand, that we could take
Yeah.
breaks, those kinds of things, and
Yeah.
um, hey, let's segue with another cool audio transition here to the birth of
Yes,
visually
new segment is
speaking.
done.
Let's
Yeah,
see. Wait,
sounds
wait.
good.
Let's do. Do you want? I'll do
Something
transition
gentle.
5.
Something
Uh
gentle.
oh. Laughing?
No crashes. Because it's like sensory friendly, right? So we're
Oh
just
yeah,
keeping it,
sensory friendly.
right?
Let's see. What would be drum roll is not drum roll. Okay, let's see what transition 5 is. I can't
Put away
promise
the
it's going to
symbol.
be.
Okay.
If it's not soft and friendly, it'll be an example of what not to do.
Sure.
Okay.
No pressure.
I mean, that was similar to the first transition, a little jarring, a little doom and gloom. So
Yeah.
I am now inspired to add my own bits and
Yeah.
bot to the
Get a
media.
chime,
I
something,
will.
rain
I
stick.
I'm just learning about this in this Riverside FM that I use to record these, which
Fun.
I love to. Yeah, and so I'm gonna upload my own soft transitions for the future.
There you
Actually,
go.
I could just have Dale edit those and to be nicer as well.
There.
Um, okay, so I love hearing about your life and your journey and your
Thanks.
diagnosis and your fidget. And all of this has led to, like, everything you've gone through in life has now
Yeah.
led to you becoming an entrepreneur and the birth of your company that's called Visually Speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're talking about the creation story of that
Mm.
and you designing something that you wish existed. So
Yeah.
tell us about Visually Speaking and uh, and my
Yeah.
listeners, I know some of my friends who have some questions for you later on here have already started reading about you and are excited about what you're doing. But you tell us,
Aw.
what is it that you've created?
Thank you for that lovely introduction. So this is my passion. So anyone who knows anything about autistic people, it's like this is when we info dump. So like buckle up, right? Like I can
Buckle
talk
up.
about my passion all day, all week. So yeah, it's really I feel super privileged that I have the opportunity to create a company that is based on everything that I care deeply about and like all I feel like my life experience and like the lenses and the hats I wear, like my parent hat and my educator hat and my like, neurodivergent person going through the world hat. I get to weave all that in and my strengths in like visual design or like it's nice to be able to lend them to what I think is like really inclusive tools and supports. But like it started as like seeing, like you said, you alluded to, like there was just things missing from resources when I was teaching or things that my kids benefited from in the home. And often we as educators and therapists, we make our own. And there's other layers to it too, because there's lots of things online that are available. But a lot of things, and I mean, and it makes sense if you're in a school and there's lots of people, there's like the management of the individuals that are always at play, right? So having like performance based things for academics makes sense. Having like conforming things because we're all in a group and we all have to follow the group plan and having people kind of fall in line and be able to kind of like work with the group, that also makes strategic sense. So it is what it is. But what also can happen is that the approach becomes very like neurotypical leaning, where it's like the person has to change and adapt, and it's not super neuro affirming. So that's kind of like where I really want to come at it from a neuro like affirming lens. And when I create resources or what is normally referred to as a social story, I don't call my things social stories. Because it's trademarked for one, but for the other, that they're not always super helpful. The design and the idea of them are super helpful, can really be explicit and concrete, and using a narrative to talk about things is great. But we also don't want to leave the learner out of it. And so I wanted to fill that space, but also like shine a light on why that's important and needed. Because it's not just about having the learner do what's expected of them, it's having the learner be able to thrive. So that's where like my thrive thing came into play. And so that became like a bigger thing. I'm not just creating great graphic organizers that are for sale. I'm trying to like set a tone about how we engage and talk about learning. And so like visually speaking is like I think catchy and wonderful, but also like it's layered too because the visuals are the visuals. It's the visual tools that support learning, and we all use visuals, right? Signs, icons, things that anchor us. They help us wayfind. They help us, right? You know, they enhance things, right? So visuals are everywhere, and they're just a good tool. But also the speaking part is like the dialogue that we have about learning. And especially for learners that are neurodivergent, there's usually a lot of stakeholders that are like involved in supporting them: teachers, therapists, clinicians, educators, the parents, guardians, like other support people. So we often all talk about the learners, but we look at them through our lens of expertise. And then we're kind of in our little silos, right? We have our own resources, we have our own theory, we have our own terminology, and we're not able to really like have some shared language and terminology and resources to use all together. And so that's kind of like another layer to it where I feel like I'm trying to create like a bit of an ecosystem to have tools that everyone can mutually use, have things scaffolded and anchored so that way people can access them and they're not one-offs, like they're relating to different themes. So I kind of have like this holistic learning model that I want to eventually like share with people. But again, I'm trying to, this is where the business part's coming in. I find it really hard. So I'm like, I got all this
Yeah.
great stuff to share with everybody. And it's like, I need to get to know people and have them trust me and give them some things that they're wanting right now. And it's like this bridge of like the dream of it being like this big, beautiful resource library and lots of like pathways to have really rich discussion speaking. And then right now just being like, okay, how do we make this like a business that can grow and have different, you know, and from marketing. And it's been this whole learning curve. But yeah, so
Yeah.
it's grown, but it's like, I feel like there's a need for it from all the different angles. And I just want to kind of make it happen.
I understand completely. And it's tough. It's tough to, to know where do I start, and now I know that you are good at mapping things out. And if, and, that's like, this is where neurodivergence and, comes in super handy. And when you have created these things in your life to cope sometimes or to
Hmm.
learn, and you've done that yourself as an entrepreneur, I find it quite advantageous, because you already have that experience in mapping things out, so you could kind of map out what your vision is, and that still it's challenging, but
Hmm.
you're a visionary as well, and so you'll try these things, and then
Hmm.
if make an adjustment if it doesn't
Yeah.
work out. But it's, of course, it's
Yeah.
a big job. It's,
It is. And to
yeah.
be honest, you had mentioned, now I remember part of your other question was like medication and what do you like, how do you like, do you treat it? And and so I kind of
Hmm.
went on like the identity like lane, but I
Yeah.
also pursued medication. And so that really helped me with my executive functioning. And so I didn't realize how, like my capacity for like working memory, for example, was so limited. And so I think like I leveraged my visual spatial skills so much to compensate for that. So I would be making mnemonics and things and having like references charts and draw things. And it was like, but if you would look at like my notes from like a lecture or something, they were garbage. Like, and I would like highlight things in a textbook and it would just be like all the same color because I couldn't discern what was important and what wasn't. And my
Oh, I
attention was
can relate.
always going, and it was like, and then I would tell myself, oh, you don't care. Like, why are you so like lazy? Focus, like, study. And I'd be like, I'm really trying, but it just, I couldn't, like, it wouldn't
Ah,
stick. It was like in
uh-huh.
and out, in and out. And unless I was hyper focused, like pulled into something,
Yeah.
like, but I didn't have control over it. And that's one thing too with like ADHD that I didn't realize. It wasn't that you can't focus, it was that you can't regulate it. So it's like I have
Yeah.
limited choice over what I'm into.
Thank
See,
you for
but when she's so
sharing.
focused when she's writing her
Eh,
stories in her room, and it's like, yeah, because like that's what I was like sucked into. But like,
yeah.
I can't just like package that and carry it over to whatever else, even if I think it's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing about the medication as well, because I too have pursued medication, late in life. Like I was 45 and it's helped with my executive decision making.
Hmm.
And I no longer, because I just used to spend way too much time I love dreaming and scheming, but
Hmm.
I also love getting things done and
Yeah.
seeing movement and progress and moving,
Yeah.
or focusing on one thing at a time and not 20
Hmm.
things, because
Hmm.
that adds to anxiety. So it's helped with
Yep.
all those things. And I know everybody's, search for, um, what works for you is different. So I feel very lucky in that sense that
Hmm.
right now, this is working for me, and it sounds like
Right.
it's working for you.
Yeah.
Um, and before we get to a couple of wonderful questions, uh, the coming out with visually speaking, and of course, and the decision too to be very open about your diagnosis, and that's part
Hmm.
of who you are and your work. And
Hmm.
it um, was that easy? Is that an easy decision, or was it just like I have to do this?
I took a long time because like I dreamed up the idea of like creating visual resources a long time ago, and I didn't really know to what extent I would be like public about it. And so it was something that it took me a while to kind of like recognize and like step out as, no, this is when you actually like come out as you doing these things, and you're not like anonymously like putting amazing things out here, and it's just like, and it's just they catch fire and everything's great. It's like, no, it's like it's the story that matters too. And yeah, so it was an evolution, but I recognize now that it wouldn't be the same without my voice and my perspective being like present with it. And I really like it. Like it was fun. I went to a couple of like events for the first time, and I got like a table and I had a few resources and things, and it was a lot because again, like I put my earplugs in, and I was just like, okay, this is really overstimulating and everything, and people are coming at me. But then I had this like, when like time slows down, I'm just like, people are coming to my table to ask me about my passions. I was like, this is the best. And so like that was great. And it also was like people can connect with me. And it was like I didn't have to do like small talk shenanigans, right? Because I hate small talk so much.
Yeah.
So it was just nice to come people and be like curious and be like, and I'd be like, boom. And we just would like connect. And I'm like, oh, I just love connecting with people. It's just that I do it in a different way, or I find it tricky to find those really like authentic engagement, like
Yeah.
moments, kind of like that conversation we had.
Yeah.
It's kind of
Right.
like those nice ones, right? So yeah, it's been nice to be all me in it. It's been hard though, because I also was like, I'm the classroom teacher. And then everyone also has perspectives of like what they think you are. And I'm like, you're so organized. You're so, like, and that is one piece of it, but it's a snapshot. And so it's been a struggle, like trying to keep that up. And which is why being able to like shift and do some like self-employment stuff. And like I'm doing some part-time work with the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario. I do a workshop series, and I wrote a resource, or co-wrote a resource. I was a writer for about teaching autistic students in Ontario classrooms. So
Oh,
I've
wow.
been able to explore that, which has been really great. And I'm like, oh, I would just really like to keep doing this.
Well, I think you will. I'm so happy to hear that you're finding, I'm not surprised to hear that it's hard, but I'm so happy to hear that you're finding joy in it.
Mhm.
I do believe that nothing great is ever achieved without some kind of sacrifices or pain,
Totally.
pain along the
Totally.
way.
Yeah. Hard
Um,
mode.
but that joy you're finding, is what you keep going back to. Remember that. Oh yeah, that is why I do what I think
Yeah.
it gets. I think does get easier the more you do it,
Hmm.
and even the hard things are like, well, I know that's going to be annoying and hard, but like I don't care. I'll
Yeah.
just do it because I know exactly what's going to be the result of this. It's going to be great. It's
Well,
going to
and there
feel
was a lot
good.
of skills that I had to develop too. Like I had some templates for some of the resources, and like a color palette designed, and it was intentionally designed to be like not like super saturated and overstimulating, but also that when something was like colored red, it would resemble for communication a red stop sign and not be like leaning too pink or whatever, because I wanted to have that communicative property of the visuals. So
Yeah.
it's like all in Adobe, and like I'm not a graphic designer, and the design team that I worked with were really lovely, and they gave me like a little web tutorial about how to use it, and I've just been like for the last 2 years like trying to become fluent in it, and so now it's getting really good. But like I also wanted the level of the resource to be like just really high quality, and when you assemble it, to have it like be a really nice experience that you can like print from home. And so yeah, it's like now that I can do those things, time is becoming more efficient. I use AI a lot, and that's been really helpful for my executive functioning, for getting like my stream of consciousness and trying to like sift through it. And then it's I'm also like training it to like catch me when I'm in my dream mode and systems
Hmm.
mode, and to
Yeah.
be like, okay, now practically, how do we move this forward and actually have some strategic direction? So this feel like 2026 is the year where I like become a business lady.
Hmm.
So,
I love it.
and not just like an educator who wants to share her passions, and show some really great things that she's created. So that's been really helpful, like just bringing the tools together. But yeah, it's all hard, but it's super worthwhile.
I agree. I agree. Well, speaking of hard, let's do something that's not hard. Let's listen to some questions from some lovely people, some lovely Heartbeat
Nice,
listeners, friends of
nice,
mine,
so
and
fun.
new fans of yours. Okay,
Aw.
so I've got three questions from James Mullinger. So I'm gonna
Okay.
play. I'm gonna play it and pause it after the first question so you can
Okay.
answer.
I have not heard these
And
questions, so
no,
this
you
is
have
like,
not.
okay.
Yeah. I was like, should I share them in advance? But then I was like, no, she can handle this. I'm sure.
Thank you.
It's
Thank you.
James.
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
Hi, Christina. So excited to hear today's podcast. I have been reading lots about the amazing work that Vanessa is doing, and can't wait to hear you both chat. Also can't wait to see you and Dale this weekend. I have three questions for Melissa, and I hope that's okay. Hi, Melissa. My name is James Mullinger. I was diagnosed with ADHD a couple of years ago. I am aged 47, and it has been extremely eye-opening, and I am absolutely in awe of the amazing work that you've been doing with Visually Speaking. And I have three questions, if that's okay. What would you say was the most enlightening thing about getting your diagnosis later in life? My
Okay, let's start
Okay.
there. Oh,
Most
the most
enlightening thing.
enlightening.
Um, I'm going to try to keep it like concise. One, understanding everything before me, like before in my history, like being able to go back through and then see it with that context and be like, oh, that makes sense. And that's me. So that's like an aha. But then the enlightenment I feel comes from like how it informs what happens next. And so like even in the last couple of years, because I was diagnosed just a couple of years ago in 2023, I just think about how it is going to impact what I'm doing moving forward, and then being able to like to adapt, to make plans, to modify, and then typically also go back and re-reflect, because I feel like there's like these layers that unlock where you're just like, oh, this also, and then oh, all that also. So it's like, it's like a loop where you're just, so that feels really enlightening. So I would say that's been really huge. It's like, it's the past, it's your present, and it's your future. And it's like, it adds this richness to all of it.
Amazing. Okay. Question number 2, unless I cut him off too early. Hold on.
My second question is, did anything in your past suddenly make more sense after you were diagnosed? A formative moment in life, or something that you had trouble reconciling with yourself, maybe emotionally or spiritually, and suddenly after being diagnosed with ADHD, did that suddenly make more sense?
Okay. Yeah. Let's get a specific example again.
Yeah.
People love that.
Yeah. Okay. So I have so many examples. So this is a good one, I think. So when I would get classrooms ready in the summer, first of all, I wanted them to be just like perfect. But all schools are different. All rooms are different. Spaces are different. So you go into a place and things are from leftovers. There's different configurations, different shelving. And so you have to kind of like redesign everything, and I tried to always optimize it, and I would spend like weeks in the classroom, but the way I would approach the things, like it was very fragmented and scattered. And so now I'm like, that is so ADHD of me in my ADHD, like, realm. But it didn't make sense at all. And I couldn't figure out why I'd be like working on a bit of something here and then working on a bit of something here. They're like, oh, I need this thing. And I'd go over there, and then I wouldn't come back to that thing. I would now be in that thing. Or I'd be like, I wouldn't have a hierarchy of what should be done first. Like layout and furniture. Nope. Let's work on the bulletin board now, Melissa. Like, or, oh, there's so much gum on these desks. I'm going to just go at the gum without any time, and know how much time's passing. And I would always say, it's done when it's done. And now I realize that mantra was because I didn't have an understanding of time, and I couldn't create those benchmarks and understand and have any predictability there. And so now I'm like, oh, that's like a core, like how I would operate. It's finished when it's finished. Yee. Which is why I would spend all the time and all the evenings and all the weekends doing the planning and the teaching and, and preparing a room. So
instead you could have had like a vacation with your family or something.
Well, and like, that's the thing. Like there would just be not any limits. And I just got caught up, or I just got this, there was a parent thing, and, or I won't say this example, but there'd be like times where I would like pour in a lot of energy. It's a bit of a joke, but also like a triggering situation from like my husband and I, where we're like, that was not a great use of your time. I'm like, I know. And I'm sorry, but like the color coding, it's kind of like we're laughing about it now, but it's like, it's still a little sore. I'm like, I can't believe I spent that much time painting that thing.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay, let's see if I cut him off. No, you did. That was phenomenal.
And then finally, what has changed for you since finding out that you have ADHD? And how would you say it has changed the way that you parent, being someone neurodiverse with neurodiverse children? Obviously, it gives you a whole fresh and different understanding of what they're going through, something which we didn't have growing up. But how does it change your parenting day to day, would you say? And also, may I just say how wonderful it is that that children now, thanks to people like yourself, are getting all of the help and support that they need to turn this thing into their superpower, so to speak. All of which, of course, were not things available to us when we were their age. Well, thank you both so much, and I can't wait to listen to the podcast. And Melissa, I can't wait to meet you in person in the future. And Christina, I will see you on Saturday. Thank you both so much.
That's okay. Before you answer that question, which I forgot what it was. No, I remember. Do you know what it was? Do you know?
Yeah, it was like two-pronged, and I feel like the interview has talked a lot about it, but the parenting piece, I think I will.
Okay, we'll speak to that. But I want to say, James, I can't wait to see you this weekend too, even though this will air after this weekend. He's playing at down the road from me at the Oxford Capitol Theatre in Cumberland County. And James is also performing in Halifax. Tickets are going fast. I checked.
Nice.
At the Rebecca Cohen in April. And so visit jamesbollinger.com, everybody. He's such a phenomenal human, but also Canadian, British comedian living in New Brunswick now. Moved to New Brunswick with his family. His wife is from Quispamsis. And anyway, so thank you, James, for your questions. We love you so much. And you did a great job in Oxford. That's my assumption. And thanks for coming for dinner. So yes, Melissa, tell us about how parenting changed
So
for you.
parenting continues to change. So it's an evolution. I feel like it changed with my elementary school experience. It changed with my special education experience. It changed as each kid, we were curious and began that kind of, discovery process with them. But for me, like having the diagnosis, which is, I think, where like James's question was anchored, like I need to model how to take care of my brain and explain what's happening when it happens. And without getting like too deep into it, like, autistic people and neurodivergent people, they have meltdowns. And so that's hard to admit. And there's a lot of great stuff about our creative brains and how we are just different. But there's a lot of challenges that come with that. And so I did not want to ever have a meltdown, right? I wanted to like fix that up right quick. But to realize that it happens for little people and big people. And then to make sure that you're trying to like not have them happen too much, because that means that maybe you've pushed yourself too much, you're depleted. And so to model the regulation and to like frame it as, and again, I've been working hard in therapy with this, like the situation demanded more of me than I had to give it. And so it's not about what the kid did. And a thing that I have to always remember too is like they don't have their fully developed frontal cortexes yet, right? So they work with their emotions brains and they see things differently. And so we have to be, that brain for them, that thinking, and give them that context. And so I always say, if things, are getting heated, like maybe even heated from multiple members, not just like me all the time, but it's everyone. Like our house, we want it to be a safe place, but that does not necessarily mean it's calm and quiet and peaceful, because there's 5 people with sometimes competing and contradictory sensory needs. And so like just being able to talk about how we have to share the space and acknowledge and validate someone's needs and not have it be like shamed or taken out of context, like taking it personally, right? And it's like, well, they're stuck right now. Maybe they're stuck thinking, or they're having some big feelings around this, or they need to process it. Like it's just that tone, and creating space to spread out. Like we had this thought of like family events, what that looked like, right? And so I've been having to shift what family time can look like. And sometimes the stars align and we all do a thing together. And other times that just isn't reasonable. And that's again getting out of what you wish and what is really what's going to serve your family members, and being like responsive to them in the moment and not reactive. So yeah, that's like a whole lot, but it's like it keeps evolving. But like, to think of myself as like the role model that never shows a sign of weakness or has any, you know, vulnerabilities or makes mistakes, like, no, I'm modeling it, and I talk about my
Good for
challenges
you.
all the time, and I cry a lot.
Oh my goodness. I think that's so important for everyone to see and experience,
Yeah.
especially kids, because you don't see it, you don't know what to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
I love that answer. Okay, one more question, if if I can keep you a couple more minutes,
Sure.
is
We can
from my
cut
dear
out the bird
friend.
part for the sake of the
Oh,
question.
I love the bird part,
Oh,
buddy.
all
No
good. It's all
way.
good.
Buddy has to have a memory
Yeah.
memorial here
Yeah.
with this
Rest in peace, buddy.
podcast.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Hi, Melissa. My name is Krista, and I'm friends with Christina. And I am on the spectrum, and I'm diagnosed with OCD. And I have a theory that has been proven with research, but I think it's more broad, and that is neurodivergent people have the ability to communicate energetically or spiritually, if you believe in an afterlife, with other people, living beings, and beings that have passed. This research I mentioned is from, you can learn more in the Telepathy Tapes podcast, but essentially they look at non-speakers who are neurodivergent and their ability to communicate through telepathy with people. I myself communicate with my friends' pets.
It's true.
And it's a fun thing that we do. And I genuinely feel that people who are neurodivergent have an easier time being able to do this kind of telepathy and communication energetically, spiritually. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that. If you've ever experienced this, if you have feelings when you're around people or think of people, you know, special feelings or insights and things that may come up for you. So I'm interested to know what your thoughts.
Oh, what your thoughts are. Not sure
Okay.
why that cut off. Okay, yeah.
That's okay.
That was
Thank
fun.
you. Yeah, that's really cool. It's like also a very like different question. It's like I like
Very.
it's diverse. It's beautiful.
know.
So
Love Krista.
thanks for your question, Krista. So from my like viewpoint, I you know, you have different ways of describing it, like a gut feeling and intuition, sixth sense. Like I've been very in tune with that growing up, and I would visualize a lot. And sometimes the things that I would visualize, I felt had, like where I didn't have context or information about what was happening, it seemed pretty accurate when I would then experience the event. And so I don't really know what to make of it. I just am curious about it, and I've noticed it. And so I definitely feel like as what I like to call a complex processor instead of, you know, a delayed processor. I think we're taking in lots of information, and I don't think we all have articulated all the different tools or like things that we actually are taking in and processing. So I think that's where you're thinking about that, you know, the energetic connection between people. And I'm super fascinated in general with like the yoga energy and prana and like and meditation and affirmations and manifesting. Like I'm super curious about that, and other people's spiritual connections and how it's like just so different, but also so like united and universal, and what anchors us as human beings. Anyway, don't want to get too philosophical.
Yeah. No,
But
that was great. Yeah.
I think it's really just interesting. I'm just interested, right?
Me too.
And so, yeah, I feel like there are levels of things that I feel and process and get from other people, or from like places where lots of stuff's gone down. Like I'll get vibes in places like hospitals have always been a real challenge for me. I feel like I feel the weight of whatever's happening there. And it's a lot of it's joyful, but there's a lot of it that's grief. I always have felt really intense feelings and discomfort at times in places like hospitals, or places where there's been like historical things like monuments, or like churches where there's been lots of like healing, like, you know, like the St. Joseph's Oratory, like those places. Like whenever I'm like walking through a place like that where lots of stuff's happened, I feel like a weight to it. And sometimes I feel emotional too. And again, I don't know what layers are triggering those feelings, but I certainly like acknowledge that they're there, and I don't think it's random, because I don't think very much is random. I think that's kind of like where I kind of come from. Like if something's happening, I'm not just like, whatever, who cares? I'm just like, no, like why? Like it must mean something. So yeah, like good on you, explore it and like report back what you discover. I'm never not learning. Like there's no end point to this, right? Like it's like we're just constantly trying to evolve and become our best selves, and like let's layer in some understanding and different perspectives. Like I don't see the harm in that.
I don't either. I do not either at all.
Yeah.
Okay, so the offerings. I want to just quickly go over those before I say my goodbye. This has been so much fun though, because you have a website coming out soon, and it's going to be WCAG, WCAG,
Yes.
WCAG.
Web
That's what that.
content accessibility guidelines. It like there's like processes to have it audited, which I mean I'm not going through, but the idea is that the foundation is there, that it will be compliant. Like it's been designed with those guidelines in mind.
Cool.
And what's lovely is like I'm learning a lot, and I think we talked about this like pre-interview, but like when I work with students who really rely on assistive technology and things, you can really see where the limitations are, regardless of if you have a screen reader or voice to text or whatever. If a website isn't designed for that person in mind, like it can be super limiting what they can actually get out of it. And so even just like the mobile, a tablet and like a web version, like my website's really designed well that it will work on any platform.
Yep.
And things that are sometimes super cool, like animation type stuff, we lean against, like we don't do them because they don't translate well. Yeah, and it's sometimes just like things you just didn't know, and you're like, oh darn. When you say like learn more, like if that alt text is learn more and you're not providing context of what that does, then someone having that read to them is just not going to get meaning from it.
That's right.
It's ambiguous and confusing.
It's a barrier between what you're trying to communicate and what they want to receive. And there are tools online, I don't have them off the top of my head, that can help you in designing and or even using, like Squarespace or yeah. So check that out, folks, because I know I went through the process with an auditor with funding from the federal government, actually, to have my website compliant with the WCAG 2.0 standards. And that means too, I need to maintain it. And there's some simple things I had to learn. Well, how do I do that? So I had to be taught that because I had no clue. And it's now that it's part of my practice, it's not hard anymore. And it's enabling, it's encouraging, it's empowering, I suppose. Not that I'm perfect at it, but it's good to try. That's for sure. Melissa, I adore you, and I'm so proud of what you've built. I want to thank you for being here and for doing what you're doing. And my little heartbeat listeners, I'm going to put Melissa's website in the show notes so you can follow visuallyspeakinginc.com. What's coming down the pipeline. Get ready, check it out, share it with your friends.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This was lots of fun. I hope it kind of tickled all the interest points that you were hoping to get out of the conversation.
Absolutely. I'm just so glad we crammed a lot into We covered it all. Of course, we could have done 5 of these today, but no,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
each
This is
have.
part of a series. See you next week,
That's
Christina.
right. Yes. Goodbye. We'll have you back though. Because I want to know.
I would love to come back.
I want to know like how things are going, and then the things that you've learned, and
Yeah.
really between you and me, it's mostly my friends on the podcast. So like I just keep having you back, and it's just time we
great.
can hang out. Yeah.
That sounds great.